"Please don't come any closer," she cried. The Duke found her, and his heart stopped. A runaway maid, cornered on a lonely road, lifts her trembling voice against the shadows. Her cry slices through the night, echoing against the chapel walls. But the man who steps forward isn't a thief, he's a duke in disguise, and the sight of her nearly brings him to his knees. In a land where scandal can ruin a family overnight, she carries something no maid should hold. A deed to water that nobles would kill to possess. The townsfolk whisper. A ruthless baron waits, his forged contract ready to drag her in chains. Every step closer to the truth pulls them into danger, where class, power, and passion collide. What will happen when her secret is revealed before the whole court? And when the Duke must choose between honor and love, will he protect her or lose her forever? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Clara's feet pounded against the damp forest floor as she ran through the darkness, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The leather satchel bounced against her hip with each desperate stride, filled with the precious papers that proved her father's legitimate claim to the surveyed lands. Behind her, angry shouts and the baying of hounds pierced the pre-dawn silence. "Find her!" Baron Redstone's voice boomed through the trees. "Those papers belong to me." Branches whipped at Clara's face as she pushed through the undergrowth. Her plain wool dress was soaked with dew, and her legs trembled with exhaustion. She had been running for what felt like hours, ever since she'd slipped out of the manor's servant quarters with her father's hidden documents. The sound of horses. Hooves grew closer. Orange torchlight flickered between the trees, casting monster-like shadows that seemed to reach for her with grasping fingers. Clara's heart hammered in her chest as she spotted a clearing ahead, where the crumbling walls of an old chapel rose against the lightening sky. Perhaps there she could hide, find a moment's rest to catch her breath. Her father's words echoed in her memory. "Keep these safe, Clara. They're the truth of our family's claim. Don't let them fall into wrong hands." She had barely reached the edge of the clearing when a sharp crack split the air, the sound of a branch breaking under someone's foot. Clara spun around, pressing her back against a weathered stone wall. The satchel's leather strap cut into her shoulder as she clutched it closer. "Please don't come any closer," she cried out, her voice shaking but determined. The pursuing shouts seemed more distant now, but this new threat was right upon her. A tall figure emerged from the shadows, wrapped in a plain traveling cloak. Behind him, a single servant held the reins of 2 horses. Clara's heart leaped to her throat, but instead of the Baron's men, she found herself staring into the concerned face of a gentleman she had never seen before. "Be at ease, miss," he said softly, his refined voice carrying authority despite its gentleness. "You appear to be in some distress." Before Clara could respond, the Baron's hunting party crashed through the trees on the far side of the clearing. Torchlight illuminated their cruel faces, and the hounds strained at their leashes. The stranger's expression hardened as he took in the scene. In one fluid motion, he drew a pistol from beneath his cloak. The weapon gleamed in the weak pre-dawn light as he raised it skyward. 2 sharp cracks echoed through the clearing as he fired into the air. The horses reared and whinnied, the hounds cowered, and the Baron's men stumbled backward in surprise. "I suggest you gentlemen return to your master," the stranger called out, his voice now ringing with unmistakable command. "This lady is under my protection." Clara watched in amazement as the pursuing party hesitated, then melted back into the shadows of the forest. Their torches receded like fireflies among the trees, leaving behind blessed silence broken only by the gentle stamping of horses' hooves. When the stranger turned back to her, Clara found herself unable to look away from his eyes. They were kind eyes, she thought, but also sad, the eyes of someone who carried heavy burdens of his own. Something in his gaze seemed to see past her sodden dress and disheveled appearance to recognize the dignity she struggled to maintain. Her own fear and exhaustion warred with a strange sense of safety in his presence. Yet she kept her chin lifted, refusing to bow even as her legs trembled with fatigue. She would not show weakness, not even before this unexpected savior. "We should find proper shelter before dawn breaks fully," he said, gesturing to the lightening horizon. "My servant knows of an inn some miles hence, where you may rest and dry yourself." He paused, then added more softly, "I am Alistair Hawthorne. You have my word that no harm will come to you in my company." Clara hesitated, weighing her options. The Baron's men would return with reinforcements once they reported to their master. She had nowhere else to go, and this stranger had already proven himself willing to defend her. Something in his manner spoke of honor, of protection offered without demand for payment. "Thank you," she managed to say, her voice steadier now. "I am Clara Whitcomb." Their eyes met once more, and in that moment, something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits despite their obvious differences in station. Alistair's heart faltered as he registered the complexity in her gaze. Fear mingled with fierce determination. Vulnerability wrapped in iron resolve. Together, they turned toward the waiting horses as the first rays of dawn began to paint the sky in shades of pearl and gold. Inside the broken chapel, Clara huddled close to the small fire that Alistair had skillfully kindled from dry twigs and fallen leaves. Moonlight filtered through holes in the ancient roof, casting silvery patterns on the worn stone floor. The flames cast a warm glow across their faces, making shadows dance against the crumbling walls. "Please, let me tend to those scratches," Alistair said softly, pulling a clean white kerchief from his pocket. His voice held genuine concern rather than the commanding tone Clara was accustomed to from men of apparent means. Clara extended her trembling hands, palms up. The thorns and branches had left angry red marks across her skin during her desperate flight. "Thank you, sir," she whispered, watching as he carefully wrapped the fine cloth around her injuries. "These cuts need proper care," he murmured, his gentle touch at odds with his weather-worn cloak and muddy boots. "Now, pray tell me why Baron Redstone's men pursue you with such vigor?" Clara's fingers tightened around the leather satchel in her lap. "I am no thief, sir, despite what they might claim." She withdrew several carefully preserved documents, their edges worn but the writing still clear. "These belong to my father. He was a royal surveyor." Alistair's eyes widened as she carefully unfolded one of the papers, revealing an official document marked with a distinctive red royal seal. "This deed speaks of a natural spring," she explained, her voice growing stronger. "My father discovered it while mapping the Northwestern Territories. The crown granted him rights to the land surrounding it." The fire crackled as Alistair studied the document with careful attention. Clara watched his face, searching for signs of disbelief or dismissal, but found only thoughtful consideration. "Baron Redstone... She swallowed hard, forcing herself to continue. "He claims my father promised him both the land and my hand in marriage before his death. But I know this to be false. My father would never have traded me like cattle, nor given away land meant for my inheritance." Alistair's jaw tightened at her words. "And you never consented to this arrangement?" "Never," Clara declared firmly, lifting her chin. "The Baron fabricated this claim after my father's passing, knowing I had no male relative to champion my cause. He thought to intimidate me into submission, but... She gestured to the papers. "These prove my rightful inheritance. What do you intend to do?" Alistair asked, though something in his expression suggested he already knew the answer. "I mean to present my case before Magistrate Pritchard in town," Clara replied, determination clear in her voice despite her obvious exhaustion. "These documents bear the royal seal. Surely the law must recognize my claim." Through the broken windows, the sky had begun to lighten from black to deep blue. The first birds stirred in the trees outside, their morning songs mixing with the distant toll of church bells from a village beyond the woods. Alistair rose and peered out through a gap in the ancient stones. "Dawn approaches," he observed. "The town lies 3 miles hence, along the valley road. He turned back to Clara, his expression earnest. "Allow me to escort you there. The Baron's men may still lurk in these woods." Clara hesitated, studying the stranger who had already shown her more kindness than any man since her father's death. While his manner was refined, his clothing spoke of common status. Yet something about him inspired trust, perhaps the quiet strength in his bearing, or the genuine concern in his eyes. The church bells tolled again, clearer now in the growing light. Clara thought of the dangerous journey ahead and the even more daunting task of facing the magistrate. Having an ally, even a stranger, suddenly seemed far preferable to facing it alone. "Very well," she agreed at last, carefully returning the documents to her satchel. "I would be grateful for your protection." Together, they extinguished the fire and stepped out into the misty dawn. The muddy track stretched before them, winding down toward the distant village. Clara squared her shoulders, drawing strength from Alistair's steady presence. Beside her as they began their journey toward the town and toward justice. The morning sun climbed higher as Clara and Alistair made their way along the winding dirt road. After hours of steady walking, the modest village of Millbrook came into view, its church spire rising above thatched roofs. It was market day, and the village square bustled with activity. Wooden carts creaked under loads of vegetables, sheep bleated in temporary pens, and villagers gathered in small groups, their voices a constant murmur of gossip and haggling. Clara pulled her hood lower, keeping her face in shadow. Her boots were muddy from the journey, but she walked with determination, the leather satchel clutched tightly against her side. Alistair touched her elbow gently, guiding her through the crowd. "Wait here in the shadow of the church," he said softly. "I will fetch us some provisions from the inn." Clara nodded, pressing herself against the cool stone wall as Alistair disappeared into the Tudor-style building. The scent of fresh bread wafted from the baker's stall nearby, making her stomach growl. She had not eaten since fleeing Redstone Manor the previous night. Alistair soon returned with a loaf of crusty bread and 2 pewter cups of ale. They had just found a quiet corner to rest when the clatter of hooves and wooden wheels drew everyone's attention. A gilded carriage rolled into the square, its polished surface gleaming in the midday sun. Clara's heart nearly stopped as Baron Redstone himself stepped down, his fine boots clicking on the cobblestones. "Good people of Millbrook." The Baron's voice rang out across the square. His elegant coat and confident bearing commanded immediate attention. "I seek a runaway maid, a thief who has stolen valuable family papers from my household." The crowd fell silent, all eyes turning to the Baron. Clara shrank further into the shadows, but her worn dress and mud-splattered hem marked her as clearly different from the local village. Women in their market-day best. "Her name is Clara Whitcomb," Redstone continued, his tone dripping with false concern. "A troubled girl, sadly led astray. She has taken documents that could ruin innocent families if misused." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Market women drew back, shaking their heads. A mother pulled her curious children closer. Clara felt the weight of suspicious glances, could hear the murmured words, thief and runaway, passing from lip to lip. Alistair's jaw clenched. His hand moved instinctively to where his ducal seal hung hidden beneath his plain shirt. One word from him would silence Redstone's lies, but revealing himself as the Duke of Ashford would raise far too many questions about his own disguised presence so far from his estates. "Stay. Come," he whispered to Clara. "We will find another way." Clara's fingers tightened on the leather satchel. Inside lay her father's careful surveys, his official deed to the Springlands, marked with the royal seal, her only proof against Redstone's false claims of ownership and unwanted marriage proposals. "These papers are all that stand between justice and ruin," she whispered back, her voice trembling but determined. "Without them, he will take everything my father worked for and force me to ... double quotes. She couldn't finish the sentence. "I swear I will protect you." Alistair replied quietly, his voice carrying the weight of an oath. "We will see justice done." They began moving carefully toward the far side of the square, where the road led onward to the next town. Redstone's men, the same rough fellows who had chased Clara through the woods, now stood watching from the shadows of the inn. Their dark eyes followed every move Clara and Alistair made, but they held back, perhaps wary of causing a scene that might draw too much attention to their master's affairs. The Baron himself had returned to his carriage, but his presence lingered like a shadow over the market square. As Clara and Alistair slipped away down the dusty road, the whispers and stares of the villagers followed them, clinging like burrs to their departure. The autumn sun had already dipped below the horizon when Clara and Alistair approached the Hunted Fox Inn. Yellow candlelight spilled from its windows, and the sound of fiddles mixed with hearty laughter drifted into the deepening dusk. Weather-worn boards creaked under their tired feet as they climbed the short steps to the door. Inside, the common room bustled with activity. Rough-hewn wooden tables held pewter tankards of ale, while farm workers and travelers alike tapped their feet to the lively music. Two fiddlers, perched on stools near the hearth, drew their bows across the strings with practiced ease. The warm air carried the scent of roasted meat and wood smoke. Clara stayed close to Alistair's side as he approached the innkeeper, a stout man with ruddy cheeks who stood behind a scarred wooden counter. "Good evening," Alistair said, his voice carefully modulated to hide any hint of noble bearing. "My sister and I seek lodging for the night." The innkeeper's eyes flicked between them, noting Clara's drawn hood and Alistair's plain attire. "One small chamber left," he said, rubbing his chin. 2 silver pennies. Includes supper." Alistair counted out the coins while Clara kept her face turned away from the crowded room. A serving girl led them upstairs to a tiny chamber with a narrow bed and a small table bearing a single candle. Clara would take the bed, they had agreed, while Alistair would sleep in the chair. When they returned downstairs for supper, they found a quiet corner table away from the main bustle. The serving girl brought them bowls of hot stew and chunks of dark bread. As they ate, Clara's eyes grew distant, watching the candle flame dance. "My father," she said softly, breaking their comfortable silence, "would light just such a candle each evening after his surveying work was done." Her fingers traced the wooden table's grain. "He taught me my letters by that light, showing such patience when I struggled with the harder words." Alistair watched her face in the flickering light, struck by the gentle strength he saw there. "He sounds like a remarkable man," he said, his throat tight with emotion. The words, "I am the Duke of Ashford," pressed against his lips, but he held them back. How could he reveal his true identity now, when she had just shared such a tender memory of learning alongside her father, a man who saw value in educating his daughter regardless of her station? In the shadows near the kitchen door, neither of them noticed a cloaked figure pass a folded paper to a well-dressed man, Baron Redstone's steward, Master Silas. The steward's thin fingers closed around the message, and he slipped away up the back stairs without drawing attention. As the evening wore on, the common room gradually emptied. Clara retired first, while Alistair remained below, nursing a final cup of ale and watching the dying fire. When he finally made his way to their shared chamber, he found Clara already asleep, her face peaceful in the moonlight that filtered through the small window. Settling into the hard wooden chair, Alistair tried to find comfort, but sleep proved elusive. When it finally came, his dreams were filled with Clara's face, her eyes bright with determination as she spoke of justice, her gentle smile as she remembered her father's teachings. In his dreams, she stood just out of reach, while shadows gathered around her. Down in the darkened common room, Master Silas conducted his own business by candlelight. He placed a heavy purse before the innkeeper, whose earlier ruddy complexion had paled considerably. "You will tell me everything you observe about these travelers," Silas said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Every word they speak, every direction they take when they leave." The coins clinked softly as the innkeeper's trembling Hands gathered them. Yes, sir, the innkeeper mumbled, already regretting the bargain, but unable to resist the weight of silver in his palm. They claimed to be brother and sister, but ... double quotes. But Silas leaned forward, his shadow looming on the wall. There's something odd about the gentleman's manner. He carries himself too straight for a common traveler. Silas smiled thinly, satisfaction gleaming in his eyes. The hunt was drawing closer, tightening like a noose around their unsuspecting quarry. The pale light of dawn painted the sky in gentle hues of pink and gold as Clara and Alistair guided their borrowed cart along a winding dirt track. The wooden wheels creaked over stones and roots, while their horse plodded steadily forward through morning mist. Clara sat close to Alistair on the wooden bench, her father's leather satchel clutched protectively in her lap. "It lies just beyond that ridge," Clara said, pointing to where ancient oaks gave way to younger birch trees. Father spent weeks mapping this valley, marking every stream and hollow. As they crested the hill, sunlight broke through the trees, revealing a sight that made Alistair draw in a sharp breath. Before them stretched a hidden dell, carpeted with purple and yellow wildflowers. At its heart, crystal-clear water bubbled up from mossy stones, forming a natural pool before flowing away in a merry brook. Near the spring stood a simple shrine-weathered wood adorned with faded ribbons and small offerings of dried flowers. The morning light caught the water drops, making them sparkle like scattered diamonds. "It is even more beautiful than Father described," Clara whispered, her eyes bright with unshed tears. She climbed down from the cart, her worn shoes crushing fragrant herbs that released their scent into the morning air. Alistair followed, watching as she knelt beside the spring. She trailed her fingers through the pure water, then opened her father's satchel. From within, she drew out a carefully preserved document. "This is his will," she explained, smoothing the parchment across her knee. "The spring and surrounding land are mine by right, but Father was wise in his conditions." She looked up at Alistair, her face serious. "The water must remain free for all who need it, the villagers who work these fields, and the Romany families who camp in the valley during their travels." Understanding dawned in Alistair's eyes. "And that is why Baron Redstone desires it so desperately." Clara nodded, rising to her feet. With control of the spring, he would control the entire valley. The villagers would have to pay his price for water, and the Romany would be driven away entirely. Her voice grew hard. Father believed water should be like God's grace, freely given to all who thirst. Alistair walked to the shrine, examining the simple offerings left by grateful visitors. "Your father was a remarkable man," he said softly, "to see beyond the prejudices that divide people. He taught me that true nobility lies in how we treat others," Clara replied, then flushed slightly at speaking of nobility to one she still believed was a common traveler. A gentle breeze stirred the wildflowers, carrying the sweet scent of morning blooms. Clara gathered some water in her cupped hands, offering it to Alistair. He drank, marveling at its crystal clarity. To his surprise, Clara laughed, a bright, genuine sound he had not heard from her before. "You look like a proper country fellow now," she said, gesturing to where water had dripped onto his plain shirt. Alistair found himself chuckling in return, struck by how natural it felt to share this moment with her, away from the rigid formality of his usual life. Here, by this sacred spring, he could imagine a different path, one where titles and social standing meant less than the contents of one's heart. But Clara's expression sobered. "Baron Redstone will never cease his pursuit," she warned, gathering her father's papers carefully back into the satchel. "He cannot bear to see something of value outside his control." Alistair helped her rise, his hand lingering perhaps a moment longer than necessary. "Then we must ensure your father's will is upheld legally. The magistrate's court meets in 5 days' time?" Clara nodded. "Yes, in the market town of Millbrook. If we can present Father's deed and will to Magistrate Pritchard, even Redstone's influence cannot override a royal seal. They returned to the cart, both knowing that reaching the magistrate would not be simple. Yet as they took one last look at the spring, now fully illuminated by morning sun, Alistair felt something he had not expected: hope, not just for Clara's cause, but for possibilities he had never before allowed himself to consider. The market town of Millbrook bustled with autumn revelry as Clara and Alistair arrived. Wooden stalls lined the cobbled streets, bright ribbons fluttering from every post and doorway. The sweet scent of roasted chestnuts and spiced cider filled the crisp afternoon air. Children darted between market stalls with painted faces, while village women arranged pumpkins and late-season flowers around the town square. Clara's eyes sparkled at the festive scene. After days of frightened flight, the cheerful chaos wrapped around her like a warm embrace. "I haven't seen such merriment since I was a girl," she breathed, drinking in the sights. Alistair watched her face soften with delight. "Then we must make the most of it," he said, offering his arm. Though dressed in his plain traveling clothes, he carried himself with natural grace as he guided her through the crowd. Musicians had set up near the fountain, their fiddles and pipes filling the square with lively tunes. Couples whirled in traditional country dances, skirts swishing and boots stamping in time. The setting sun painted everything in warm golden light. "Shall we?" Alistair extended his hand to Clara as the musicians struck up a familiar melody. She hesitated. "I'm just a maid. I don't know the proper steps. Neither do half the dancers here," he assured her with a gentle smile. "Come, let the music guide you." Taking his hand, Clara joined the line of dancers. The steps were simple enough: forward and back, turn your partner, weave between the other couples. Alistair's sure grip steadied her whenever she faltered. Their hands met and parted in the dance figures, each touch sending warmth through her fingers. As dusk settled over the square, lanterns were lit one by one, casting a magical glow. Clara felt lighter than air, twirling between the pools of golden light. For these precious moments, she could forget she was a fugitive. Here was only music, movement, and the answering sparkle in Alistair's eyes whenever their gazes met. When the dance ended, he led her away from the crowd toward the riverbank. The water reflected the harvest moon, now rising full and bright. Music from the square drifted to them on the evening breeze. "I've never seen you smile so freely," Alistair said softly. "I've had little cause to smile these past years," Clara admitted. "But tonight, double quotes," she trailed off, watching the moonlit ripples. "Clara," his voice was tender as he turned to face her, "these past days traveling with you, I find myself thinking of little else but your safety, your happiness." Her heart quickened. "You've shown me more kindness than any man I've known. It's more than kindness I feel." He took her hands in his, thumbs brushing over her knuckles. "When I'm with you, I feel free, as if I could be myself, not what others expect of me. I know that feeling well," she whispered. "With you, I'm not afraid anymore. For the first time since Father died, I feel safe." Alistair's eyes shone with emotion in the moonlight. He began to speak again, but harsh voices suddenly cut through the peaceful night. "There she is! Seize the Oathbreaker!" Clara whirled to see Baron Redstone's bailiffs pushing through the crowd, brandishing papers. Her blood ran cold as they approached, their faces twisted with cruel satisfaction. "By order of Baron Redstone," the lead bailiff announced loudly, drawing curious onlookers. "This woman is to be detained for breaking a legal betrothal contract and theft of family documents." "That's a lie," Clara cried as they grabbed her arms. "I never agreed to marry him." The bailiff thrust a document at the gathering crowd. Her father's own signature on the betrothal agreement. "The Baron has been most patient with his wayward bride." Clara struggled as they dragged her away, her eyes finding Alistair's in desperate appeal. He stood frozen, fists clenched, knowing that revealing his true identity as Duke of Ashford would raise dangerous questions about why he traveled in disguise with a fugitive maid. "Please," Clara pleaded as they pulled her toward a waiting carriage. "The papers are forged." But the crowd of festivalgoers turned away, muttering about faithless women and broken promises. The lovely evening shattered like glass as Clara disappeared into the darkness, leaving Alistair alone by the moonlit river. Cursing his powerlessness to protect her, Clara sat alone in the manor chamber, her prison dressed in deceptive finery. Crimson tapestries adorned cold stone walls, and a feather bed waited unused in the corner. The luxury felt hollow a gilded cage was still a cage. Through narrow windows, she watched guards patrol the courtyard below, their torches cutting through the gathering dusk. A servant girl brought her evening meal, a crust of bread, hard cheese, and watered wine. Clara noticed how the girl avoided her eyes, scurrying away as if scandal might cling to her skirts. Left alone again, Clara knelt beside the bed, clasping her hands in prayer. "Father in heaven, grant me courage," she whispered, her father's words echoing in her memory. "Truth will outlast the proud," he had told her countless times, his weathered hands showing her how to measure land, how to read the ancient markers. Now those same words strengthened her resolve. The chamber grew darker as evening deepened. Clara's thoughts drifted to Alistair, his gentle hands binding her wounds, his quiet strength during their flight. Where was he now? Had he abandoned her to her fate? She pushed the doubt away, remembering the warmth in his eyes during their dance at the festival. 2 floors below, in the servants' quarters of a nearby inn, Alistair paced before his longtime valet, Thomas. The faithful servant watched his master with growing concern. "Your Grace," Thomas pleaded, "you must declare yourself." One word from the Duke of Ashford would end this farce. Alistair ran fingers through his disheveled hair. Gone was his usual aristocratic composure, replaced by the raw anguish of a man torn between duty and desire. "If I reveal my rank now, what then? Clara would see me as just another nobleman seeking to control her fate. But surely better your protection than Redstone's tyranny." Thomas argued. "Protection?" Alistair's laugh held no mirth. "That's the very thing I've dreaded since meeting her." When she looked at me as a common traveler, there was trust in her eyes. Pure, honest trust. He gripped the back of a chair, knuckles white. "How can I tell her I'm the very thing she fears most, a man of power?" Thomas stepped closer, lowering his voice though they were alone. "Your Grace, forgive my boldness, but love must sometimes risk pride. The lady's very life may depend upon it." Alistair closed his eyes, the weight of his title pressing down like a crown of thorns. Everything he'd built with Clara, the shared laughter by the spring, their dance at the festival, felt suddenly fragile as spun glass. Meanwhile, Clara pressed her ear to the chamber door, straining to hear the voices in the corridor. Baron Redstone's distinctive tone carried clearly, sharp with cool satisfaction. "The banns will be read tomorrow," he declared to someone. 3 days hence, she'll be my wife, and that troublesome spring will finally be mine. Let her resist, it will change nothing." "But, my lord," came a hesitant voice, "the law requires consent." "The law?" Redstone's laugh sent chills down Clara's spine. "I hold her father's written promise of her hand. Who will question it? Certainly not some farmer's daughter who can barely write her name." Clara's hand flew to her bodice, where her father's true deed lay hidden in careful folds. The paper felt warm against her skin, a shield of truth against Redstone's lies. She had sewn it carefully into the lining the night before, knowing they would search her belongings. The voices faded down the corridor, but their threat lingered like poison in the air. From the town below, church bells began to toll the evening hour, each solemn note falling like lead in Clara's stomach. 7 bells, 7 days since she had fled through the woods. 7 bells marking how far she had come, and how much she stood to lose. Her fingers traced the hidden deed through the fabric. "I will not yield," she whispered fiercely to the empty room. Not to lies, not to force, not to fear itself. The final bell tolled. its echo hanging in the growing darkness like a warning of trials yet to come. The market morning dawned bright and crisp, drawing townsfolk from their homes like moths to flame. They crowded the courthouse steps, whispering and jostling as Baron Redstone's carriage clattered up the cobblestones. The courthouse itself stood stern and gray against the autumn sky, its wooden doors thrown wide to welcome the day's proceedings. Baron Redstone emerged from his carriage in a sweep of burgundy, silk and golden buttons, his white powdered wig perfectly arranged. Behind him, 2 guards dragged Clara forward in iron chains that clinked with every step. Despite her bonds, she held her head high, though her face was pale as milk, and her simple dress showed signs of her confinement. "Behold the deceiver!" Redstone's voice rang out across the courthouse yard. "See how she who would steal from nobility bears the chains of her crimes." The crowd pressed closer, their faces a mix of pity and scorn. Clara's eyes remained fixed ahead, refusing to bow beneath their stares. Her father's deed lay hidden still, sewn carefully into her bodice, her last hope for justice. Inside the courthouse, Magistrate Pritchard sat behind his elevated desk, his jowls quivering as he adjusted his spectacles. The morning light streaming through tall windows caught the dust motes dancing in the air, lending an almost holy atmosphere to the proceedings. "Your evidence, Baron Redstone?" The magistrate inquired, his tone already deferential to rank. Redstone produced a stack of papers with flourish. "Testimonies, Your Honor, from good citizens who witnessed this maid's deceptions." One by one, witnesses approached a shopkeeper, a stable boy, a washerwoman. Each told tales of Clara's supposed schemes, their eyes never quite meeting hers. The glint of coins in their palms as they left the courthouse told the true story of their testimony. "She claimed inheritance rights," declared the shopkeeper, twisting his cap in his hands. "Above her station, it was. Saw her stealing papers from his lordship's study." "I did," added the washerwoman, though Clara had never seen her face before this day. Clara's heart sank as Magistrate Pritchard nodded along, his quill scratching notes that would seal her fate. The morning wore on, and hope seemed to fade with each passing hour. "It seems clear," Pritchard began, shuffling his papers importantly, "that this young woman has indeed—" The heavy courthouse doors burst open with a thunderous crack. Silence fell like a heavy curtain as a tall figure strode down the center aisle. Sunlight caught the gold threads in his midnight blue velvet cloak, the ducal crest of Ashford gleaming on his breast. Gone was the simple traveler's garb. Here stood Alistair Hawthorne in his true identity as Duke of Ashford, his bearing regal and his expression stern. Gasps rippled through the courthouse. Baron Redstone's face drained of color, his mouth working soundlessly as he recognized the man he had dismissed as a common traveler. "Your Grace!" Magistrate Pritchard stumbled to his feet, nearly upending his inkwell. "We had no word of your coming." "Evidently not." Alistair's voice carried effortlessly through the hall. "I declare Clara Whitcomb under my protection. Furthermore, I bring proof of her claims." He withdrew a leather folio bearing the royal seal of London. Clara's eyes filled with tears of relief as Alistair, her duke, her protector, presented the documents. Each paper bore official stamps and seals, validating her father's original survey and his right to pass the spring property to his daughter. "These deeds have been verified by the Crown's own surveyors," Alistair announced. "They confirm both the boundaries and the inheritance rights detailed in Samuel Whitcomb's will." Magistrate Pritchard wiped his brow with a handkerchief, glancing nervously between the powerful men before him. This requires careful consideration. We must hear from the church as well. Reverend Matthews should speak to the moral character of all involved." The courthouse erupted in excited whispers. Townspeople craned their necks to see Clara anew, not as a criminal, but as a woman worthy of a duke's protection. Baron Redstone's face had turned from white to puce, his fingers crushing the edge of the legal table before him. "This session will reconvene tomorrow," Pritchard declared. After we have heard the good Reverend's testimony." As the crowd buzzed with excitement, Clara felt the weight of the chains lighter somehow, knowing she no longer bore them alone. Inside the church's hushed sanctuary, morning light filtered through stained glass windows, casting jeweled shadows across the worried faces of the assembled crowd. The preacher, Father Timothy, stood before the altar, his hands trembling as they clutched his worn prayer book. His weathered face bore the weight of a conscience too heavy to bear any longer. "I must speak the truth before God and man," he began, his voice quavering. The wooden pews creaked as townspeople leaned forward, straining to hear. "The betrothal contract between Baron Redstone and Miss Whitcomb," he paused, swallowing hard. "It was forged under duress. The Baron threatened to close our orphanage if I did not assist him." Gasps rippled through the church like wind through wheat. Baron Redstone's face twisted with rage, his carefully maintained composure shattering. "You doddering fool!" he snarled, lunging forward. His ringed hand struck the preacher's face with a sharp crack that echoed off the stone walls. Women screamed, children buried their faces in their mothers' skirts, and several men rose from their seats in alarm. Before anyone could react further, Redstone turned on his heel and fled, his boots thundering down the church steps. The heavy doors banged behind him, leaving a shocked silence in his wake. Clara's legs gave way beneath her. The chains binding her wrists rattled as she sank toward the floor, but Alistair was there in an instant, his strong arms catching her. "Easy now," he murmured, his ducal finery a stark contrast to her simple dress. "You're safe. You have shown more courage than any noble I have ever known," he whispered, helping her stand. His eyes shone with admiration and something deeper, something that made Clara's heart flutter despite her exhaustion. The townsfolk began approaching one by one, heads bowed in shame. "Forgive us, Miss Whitcomb," the baker's wife pleaded, wringing her apron. "We were too quick to believe the worst. We should have known better," added the blacksmith, his soot-stained face creased with regret. "Your father was always an honest man." As the morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows through the church windows, the great doors opened once more. A tall figure entered, his colorful clothes and proud bearing marking him as the Romany leader. Silver coins jingled at his belt as he approached Clara, and in his weathered hands he held something that caught the light. "Miss Whitcomb," he said, his voice deep and respectful, "we have watched these proceedings with great interest. Your vow to keep the spring free for all peoples shows wisdom beyond your years." He extended his hands, revealing a delicate silver pendant shaped like a flowing spring. "Accept this token of our alliance and friendship." Clara touched the pendant with trembling fingers, tears welling in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "My father would be proud to see this day." The magistrate, who had witnessed everything, stepped forward with keys to unlock her chains. "Baron Redstone is hereby declared outlaw," he announced formally. "His property shall be held in trust until higher courts can rule on his crimes." As the heavy irons fell away from her wrists, Clara felt lighter than air. Alistair's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally, as if they had always been meant to hold each other this way. Together, they turned toward the church doors. The autumn sunlight welcomed them as they stepped outside, its golden warmth touching Clara's face like a blessing. The townspeople made way, forming an impromptu honor guard as Clara and Alistair descended the steps. Fallen leaves crunched beneath their feet, red and gold like nature's own celebration of truth's triumph. Hand in hand, they walked into the morning, leaving behind the shadows of deceit and stepping into a future bright with possibility. The church bells began to ring, not in warning this time, but in joyous celebration of justice served and love prevailing against all odds. The autumn morning dawned clear and bright as villagers gathered in the small stone church. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, painting rainbow patterns across the wooden pews. The scent of fresh wildflowers and herbs hung sweet in the air, garlands draped along every surface by loving hands. Clara stood at the church doors, her heart fluttering beneath borrowed silk. The dress, loaned by a kindly noble lady, was the color of cream and adorned with delicate lace. Her dark hair was crowned with white roses, and in her trembling hands she held a bouquet of meadow flowers, the same kinds that grew near her father's spring dot. As the church bells began their melody, Clara took her first step down the aisle. The assembled guests turned to watch, their faces bright with joy. Peasants in their Sunday best stood beside fine lords and ladies, while Romany families added splashes of vibrant color to the gathering. All differences of rank forgotten in this moment of celebration. At the altar, Alistair waited in his full ducal regalia, though his eyes held nothing of a duke's stern pride. Instead, they shone with pure tenderness as he watched his bride approach. His smile, warm and genuine, was meant for Clara alone, not the maid she had been, nor the landowner she had become, but the brave woman who had captured his heart. Their vows were spoken with clear, steady voices that rang through the hushed church. No flowery phrases or grand declarations, just simple, honest words of love and devotion that brought tears to many eyes. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, the cheers nearly drowned out the church bells. The celebration moved to the manor's great hall, transformed by garlands and candlelight. Long tables groaned under platters of roasted meats, fresh bread, and autumn fruits. The strict rules of rank were forgotten as all took their seats together, peasant children beside noble ladies, Romany elders sharing wine with merchant wives. Laughter and music filled the air as fiddles played and voices raised in song. As dusk painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, Clara and Alistair slipped away to the manor's garden. Rose petals still clung to their late blooms, releasing their fragrance into the evening air. Alistair took Clara's hand, pressing a gentle kiss to her fingers. "My love," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "It was when you cried out in that clearing that my heart stopped, and in that moment, I began to truly live." Clara smiled, leaning into his embrace as the familiar weight of his arms encircled her. Above them, the church bells continued their joyful song, ringing out across the peaceful countryside. Their pealing seemed to echo the truth in both their hearts, that love, honest and true, could bridge any distance and heal any divide. Thank you for watching. Stories like this remind us who we are. If something touched your heart, go ahead and subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another story that just might stay with you.